Okay, so let's get the show on the road. Hello, everyone, and thank you for attending our webinar on Power Apps, where you can build your own custom line business applications using Power Apps and become a citizen developer. Now, for those of you who don't know what a citizen developer is, it's essentially anyone. Power Apps gives everybody the opportunity to develop apps for their companies without having to know how to code. This allows you to save time and money while creating applications specific to your needs. In fact, an economic impact study done by Forrester showed a 74% reduction in costs when developing an application by using Power Apps. And the apps created can be something as simple as time entry management to something complex like a CRM. Um, basically, being a citizen developer gives you the tools to automate and simplify any process you'd like to. So we'll move on to the next slide and introduce ourselves for today. So my name's Nick. I am a sales executive here at Alpha Bold. I'm a Bold enthusiast. I have 9 years of account management, and I basically love technology, and I like learning how to apply it to everyday life. And I have with me today Rob, who is a Bold enthusiast as well. He's our Director of Customer Engagement. He has 15 years of experience. He's focused on helping businesses reach their goals through technology and then maintaining those long-term relationships. He's going to be running us through the slide deck today as well as doing the actual demo. Let's move to the next slide for our agenda. All right, so today essentially what we're going to be doing is we're going to, one, go over what Power Apps are, so that way we're all familiar there. Then we're going to take a problem and try to solve it through Power Apps. And through that, we're going to kind of see the 3 steps to success, where we model it, we define the process, and then we build the app itself. In doing so, we can show you what else we can do, and then at the end, we're going to put it all together. So before I hand it over to Rob, I just want to let everybody know that I will be monitoring the questions chat. So if you do have any questions, we will stop periodically to answer those. And then also, I'd like to run a quick poll for everybody so we can kind of get an idea of where everybody stands as far as app development. So we'll give this about 10 to 15 seconds. And okay, so we'll close the poll, and I'm just going to hand it off to Rob here, and he'll take it away from here.
Thanks, Nick. Again, I'm Rob Wenstrand here at AlphaBolt. I'm our Director of Customer Engagement. Again, I sometimes have to explain my title. Microsoft changed their Dynamics CRM product about 2 years ago to be called Customer Engagement, but a lot of people still aren't aware of that. So I'm our Director of our CRM practice. So our webinar today is about Power Apps. And first off, what is Power Apps and what is the Power Apps platform? Let me describe it a little bit. So the Power Apps platform is a platform that provides essentially cross-platform application support, so development, using low-code and no-code approaches. So the idea, as Nick mentioned, of citizen developers, where your business analysts, your individual contributors, your non-developers can build applications that you need for your business without requiring a developer to go and code it for you. They can take their ideas and bringing them to software quickly without any code. We talk about the responsive layout. So in both, and today we're going to talk about specifically a model-driven app, but within the Power Apps platform, there's the Canvas apps and model-driven apps. They are responsive, which means that no matter where you're looking at that application, whether it be on a tablet or a mobile phone or a web browser, You design it once and you deploy it everywhere. So as I mentioned, today we'll be talking about model-driven apps. So what is a model-driven app? So a model-driven app is a component-focused approach to app development. It doesn't require code, although some code can be used to expand it. And the apps that you can make can be very simple or even very complex. Unlike Canvas apps, and I think I mentioned Canvas apps shortly, a short while ago, where you have a designer that has to have complete control over the app layout, a model-driven app is more driven by an existing layout with components. So we have an overarching layout that we can add our individual components to. For those of you familiar with Dynamics 365 customer engagement, you'll notice that a model-driven application uses very similar user interface. In fact, it's the same user interface and underlying data structure. In fact, Microsoft has structured it so that customer engagement modules now, such as sales, are actually just model-driven apps that are built on this overall platform. So today we'll be using that platform as a blank slate, allowing us to build software that we need. Before we go further in depth on how to do that, I want to discuss briefly the common data model. Now, this is a very, very large chart, and there's lots of words on this slide, but just to break it down, a common data model is simply just a pre-designed set of tables and fields. In the Microsoft nomenclature, they call them entities, but they're essentially just tables of records. And if we follow the common data model, utilize the common data model pieces in our app design, we can layer in other technologies on top of it. And I'll get into that a little later. So we'll revisit this slide. We'll revisit a portion of the slide later in the presentation. So today, let's solve a problem. You've all probably seen this picture a lot recently. This is the COVID-19 virus. So no, we're not going to solve the pandemic using software, but maybe there's something we can do to help those who are fighting it. This is a 3D printer. Using something like this, we can print parts to fill gaps in the manufacturing of needed parts for hospitals to help fight the pandemic. So if I have a 3D printer, what can I print? I can print face masks. So using vacuum bags or other filter mediums, we can build fairly effective masks when they're in short supply. Face shields. Using off-the-shelf clear plastics and 3D printed visors, we can provide face shields to hospitals and medical workers. Medical devices. Many of the companies making life-saving devices, such as valves for respirators, can't turn them out fast enough. Quite a few inventive folks have made low-cost parts to turn regular things into life-saving ventilators in the crisis. All right, so that's our need, but how is this Power App software going to help us? I mean, we have our 3D print enthusiasts, I'll call them our contributors, on the one side of the equation. And we have our health professionals that need those life-saving devices over here. Well, how does our enthusiast know what to print without reaching out to the hospital directly? Also, from the hospital side of the equation, they need the supplies, but it's a large effort for them to reach out to 20 different people to get those supplies that they need. If only there was a tool we could use to facilitate the requests with what our contributors can build. But as we all know, software can take ages to design and build. So can we really build this in time for it to help us during this pandemic? And the answer is yes. With Power Apps, we can do that. So using Power Apps, what we can do to speed up the process is we leverage all of the out-of-the-box components, group them together, none of it requiring any code. So it allows us to quickly and easily build a software application to track hospital requests and identify those who can contribute parts. As part of the equation, we're going to utilize Power Automate, which is part of the Power Apps platform. We're going to send email notifications when requests come in. We're also going to interact with some external data to bring data into our system. And finally, using simple tools, we'll create a web portal built on top of our application to allow hospitals and contributors to make and fulfill those part requests. And to start us off, I'm going to just briefly show sort of the final product. So this is a Power Apps portal that we put together, and this is a fairly simple, simplistic design, fairly basic. Right now, I'm not logged in. I can take a look at some of the 3D parts that we're providing. So if I click on masks here, we'll see a list of masks that our 3D printers could potentially print. If I open up this HEPA COVID coronavirus mask, it'll have some details, a description of description of the model in general, a link to the original source, and then if we scroll down further, we can actually see a number of individual pictures showing what the end product might look like. If I click on requests, I can actually see current open hospital requests, the quantity of what the part that they're asking for and the quantity of what they want. All right, so now I've given you a teaser. Let's talk about finishing the process and how we get to this journey. Before I continue, do we have any questions?
Yeah, there is one question, I guess, just real generally. What are the typical cases where someone uses Power Apps? I guess when do they step into that realm?
Sure. So a typical scenario would be you have maybe a couple Excel spreadsheets where you're tracking a bunch of data, and you'll run into issues where somebody overwrites the Excel spreadsheet or enters the wrong piece of data. We can easily take that Excel spreadsheet and turn it into a Power App, again, without any code, providing our end users with a nice, clean UI, enforcing business rules, creating automation, allowing us to bring data into it. So that would be one prime example.
Great, thank you.
Cool. All right, so let's talk about our 3 steps to success. So in order to build a Power App, I need to sort of follow 3 guidelines, and these are guidelines recommended by Microsoft. So in our case, we've isolated our problem. How can we leverage the application to overcome these? So let's break it down. First, we're going to model the business data. What does that mean? That means we're going to define I call them entities, but the tables and fields that we need to come up with to store our data. The second thing we need to do is define our processes. What are the things that we need to accomplish once we've built sort of that data model? How are we going to interact with that data? And then, quite simply, the final step is let's build the application. So get into the system, build out our data model, build out our forms, our layouts, our views, and deploy the application. So I'm going to dig in a little bit to our model, what we're going to model today. So in this scenario, we need to break down what we need to keep track of. And the first thing we need to keep track of is are the hospitals. So we need to know who the hospitals are, what their needs are. Our second piece of information is the contacts. So yeah, we're dealing with a hospital, but we need to know who the people are at that hospital that we're interacting with. Who are our contributors? So who are the people and organizations who are going to print and provide these parts? What parts are we printing? What parts are available? What kind of parts can hospitals request? Capability. So we have our contributors, we have our parts, but which contributors are able to create which parts? So we need to determine and store which who can print what. Our requests. So we have our hospitals, we have our parts. So we need to determine what parts those hospital needs. And finally, fulfillment. So a hospital's created a request, a contributor can print a part, but to fill that request, we need to keep track of who has filled what request. Now that we have kind of laid out our overall data model, let's actually take a look and incorporate what we've designed into the existing common data model as we had discussed earlier. So if I were to take a look at the core objects in the Microsoft Common Data Model, I'll see things like account and contact and email and letter, etc. In our new application, we have hospital, contributor, and contact. Well, looking at it directly, I could see that contact could go to contact. That's easy. But what about hospital and contributor? In this particular design, a contributor could be an organization or it could be a contact. So I'm going to link our contributor to the account object within our core model. And it could also be a contact within our core model. A hospital obviously is going to be an account being a company or an organization. And then contact records associated with hospitals would just simply be a contact. Now, why would I want to use the core model instead of building out the tables individually? And the reason is we can leverage the common data model, and say down the road, this sort of side project of mine turns into a nonprofit, and we need to add some finance related functionality to the business. Well, instead of buying and implementing a finance application that doesn't tie to my existing data, what I can do is I can, of course, add in all of my additional entities here, and I'll call this my 3D print app. And then maybe buy a license of finance and ops or customer engagement or Business Central, which layers in on top of the common data model. And now I have one monolithic database that actually utilizes the same data. So an account in the 3D print app is also an account on the finance side. Contact records on the 3D print app are also contact records that we can use in our finance app. And harken back to that earlier common data model, there are so many other additional applications in the Microsoft stack that will layer on top of this model so that we don't end up with silos. We don't end up with single databases that don't tie to each other. So here's what our final model will look like. Again, this might be a little on the the complex side for some of you, but it is actually pretty straightforward. Again, we're using the account and contact objects or entities from Microsoft, which has some basic field information that already exists, so we don't have to create it. And then we're going to create a number of other tables to fulfill our needs. So that's sort of the first part of solving this problem. The second part is defining our business process. So what do we need to do? We need to find a way to add data to our model. How do we get data into our model? We need to be able to associate a contributor to a part, as we discussed earlier. We need to keep track of part requests from hospitals. We need to keep track of quantities requested and provided. And then we need to send notifications to appropriate stakeholders. So these are all flows or business processes that we need to build or at least support within our app that we built. All right, so in the interest of time, what I've done is I've gone ahead and I've actually built out most of the application, which what I'm going to do first is I'm going to show you our model-driven app as it currently exists. So to do that, I'm going to go back over here. So what we see right here is a model-driven app. Again, those familiar with Dynamics customer engagement will see this and be very familiar with this. It's all built on the same platform. As you can see, we have accounts, contacts, we have our parts, requests, capabilities, and fulfillments. If I open up an account, take a look at Alvarado, we'll notice that it has a number of fields, some basic information, so address, city, state, zip. We have a phone number. If I were to actually look at, say, Scripps Mercy Hospital, we can also see that there are some contacts associated with it. I might be missing a few pieces of information here, though. So what we're going to do is we're going to customize this form a little later to show you how some of that works. If I go over here to parts, we can actually take a look at the individual parts. We saw sort of a preview of what that looked like on the portal, but if I were to dig into one of these, we'll be able to see actually a lot of the same data. So we have our description, we have sort of a preview of what this looks like, and if we look on the right-hand side, again, we have all of our photos, pictures of the individual items that are are associated to that particular part. And again, I can take a look at all of these individual parts and see sort of previews of what all we could potentially print. Again, we have requests. So these are the requests from individual hospitals. So we have our organization, contact, and part. I'm going to pull one of these open real quick. You'll notice that we have a quantity and a total fulfilled. Actually, let me open a different one here. Let's open up this one right here. So we have our quantity, our total fulfilled, but I think we might need an additional field here. And that additional field would be a maybe how many remaining to be fulfilled. So I think as part of our presentation today, we'll show you how to add a field, actually a calculated field, which will figure out how many, based upon what has been fulfilled, are remaining to be fulfilled. We mentioned briefly capability. So this is our 3D printer, John Jacoby. These are the 3 parts he's able to print. And then finally, we have our fulfillments. So these are the requests filled by certain 3D printers and the quantity that they were able to fulfill for them. All right, so let's actually get into starting to make some changes to our system. If I click over here, I've logged into make.powerapps.com. And this is the portal used to customize all of your business applications. This is where we'll be building the apps. And you'll notice that they actually have some nice, on the homepage, ways to start some of the things we're showing today. So for example, if I wanted to start building a model-driven app, I can click on this link here and it will sort of guide me through that process.
Hey, Rob.
Yeah.
Real quick, since we're right here, we did have a question, just real briefly, the difference between Canvas apps and model-driven apps again?
Sure. So a Canvas app is something that allows you complete control over the application. So you can pick and choose all of your design elements. It is not a completely no-code approach, however. It's close, but it will still require some level of programming knowledge to get all of the feel and functionality working. But essentially, as this term sort of implies, it provides a blank canvas for you to drag and drop controls onto a form layout, and then you go and you tie your data model to that form layout. A model-driven app is a component-based approach. So we have our basic UI. In fact, it's very similar to what we're seeing right here with a left nav and a top nav. We can build our data model on the CDM, CDS platform as we sort of discussed. So basically we'll build our data model. And then we build forms on top of that. And again, following overall layout, we can take individual components, drop them onto those forms, and essentially build out the application that we need with the constraint that we have to follow an overall Microsoft layout. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that was perfect. Thank you.
All right. So quick tour of our make.powerapps.com. On the left-hand side, the first thing I'm going to dig into is our data. So underneath the data, you see this word that says entities, and I've used this a couple times. And entities are tables. They're individual record types. If I click on it, you'll notice that we have all of the entities or objects that were in the common data model or in this list, including account, which we'll start with. But we also can see that we've created a couple of them. We have part, request, capability, etc., fulfillment. But first I'm going to go into our account. And once I'm in the account, you can see that we have a list of all of our fields. Really quite straightforward. We have different types. We can add fields. We can modify existing ones. We can delete certain fields. The other two areas in this section that we're going to focus on are views and forms. Views are the grids that we see whenever we look at our application. So if I were to pull up accounts and I see active accounts, this is our grid. It's our grid of information. We've got account name, relationship type, main phone. If I wanted to modify this layout, I could do that by going into the active accounts view and modifying it. But then we have our form layouts. And you'll notice that there's a couple different types, but I'm going to focus on our main form type today. And let's actually take a look and see what this looks like. So I'm going to drill into our account. And you'll see that when it comes up, it's a preview of what we saw earlier when we were looking at the actual application. There we go. This is a drag and drop interface. So I'm going to make a couple of changes here. The first one I'm going to make is, nobody's really using faxes these days, so I'm going to go ahead and remove the field. I'm going to remove it off the form. I haven't deleted the field from the data model, so if I need to bring it back at any given time, I can, but I'm going to remove it from the form. It's excess information that I don't need. I'm going to remove ticker symbol. There's this details tab. It's got a bunch of information that I don't really need to track. So again, I could delete it, but what I'm going to do instead is I'm just going to hide it so it's not visible in our user interface. Finally, one of the things I noticed when we were looking at the account is that I wasn't able to see any of the requests that were requested by this particular hospital. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly add, using our tools here, I'm going to add a grid of request information in the center of our form. So if I go over here, I can see that I've got a couple of different options. I'm going to choose to add a one-column section. I'll just drag it right there. Drag it underneath the timeline. So there's our one-column section. I'll go ahead and name the section requests. And then I'll go down to our subgrid, and I'll add a subgrid. Again, these requests are associated with the account. So it would be a subgrid is a way of showing information actually related to different accounts. So, or related to different objects within the system. We'll go ahead and go down here to requests, and we'll show the active request view. Well, and we'll hit done. So now our hospital page, or our account page, will have this grid of active requests. I'm going to go ahead and save. As part of this process, I will publish it. So once you've saved a form, it's not live yet. To make it live, we also need to publish. So I'm going to go ahead and publish the form. And let's go take a look and see how quickly and easily we were able to modify our application. Wait for that publish to finish here. All right. So if I go back over to our form here and I click on, let's do scripts, Mercy Hospital, and I'll hit the refresh button. You'll notice that our fields are gone on the left-hand side, and we now have this subgrid here, so I can actually see all the current open requests that are associated to this hospital. Very easy to make changes. I'm going to show you one more scenario, and then we'll continue on. So the second thing I noticed, again, just to remind you, is that under requests, we have our requests, but I want to see a field that shows how many are needed, how many remaining are needed to fulfill this request. So again, I'm going to come back over here to our make.powerapps.com portal. Under entities, if I go back here, I can go down here to request. And in the interest of time, I did go ahead and pre-create the field, but it's actually quite easy. You just hit add field, and what I'll do is I'll open this up and show you what it looks like. A window like this will show up. You type in your field, you choose your type. In this particular case, you can't produce a fractional part, half a part, so choose the whole number. And I made it a calculated field. And what is a calculated field? A calculated field allows us to take multiple pieces of information within the system and calculate them. So in this case, it's a very simple calculation. I'm going to take the total needed minus the quantity, the total fulfilled, and that should give us the remaining that we need. And it will dynamically calculate as those fields update. We'll just give it a moment here. All right. It's fairly simple if you kind of understand some of these basic concepts. So basically, if a certain condition occurs, then we want to do a particular action. In this particular case, I want to make sure that the request, let's see, if I want to make sure that the quantity contains data. And I want to make sure that the total fulfilled contains data. Basically, we don't want to do the calculation unless there's information for us to do the calculation with. So, and then we'll do our action. And our action is very simply taking our quantity, subtracting our total fulfilled. That's it. There's our calculation. Awesome. So now that we've added that field, I'm going to go again modify our form. And I'll drag that field onto our form. Again, I'm going to save and publish. All right. Go ahead and refresh this page. There we are. So quantity is 50, total fulfilled 25, remaining needed 25. So one of the other things I will point out while we're looking at this form is that you'll notice this field has a little calculation button next to it. What this is doing is this is actually something called a rollup field. So all of the fulfillments that we have against this request, it's summing up all those values and rolling it up into this field. So that's how it's calculating. All right. So that sort of wraps up sort of the basic configuration. Do we have any questions from the audience?
So we have a question about basically can the Power Apps be integrated with other applications like Dynamics, SharePoint, AX, and can we as AlphaBold help them with that?
Absolutely. So AlphaBold has we have a number of, we're multidisciplined. So we have a number of consulting arms. So we can help you with SharePoint. Again, in this platform, SharePoint integrates directly with Power Apps and model-driven apps specifically. We have a Power BI practice. We have we're able to help you integrate with finance and ops, for example, using some new Microsoft technologies for integration. And of course, we can integrate with a number of different third-party, actually pretty much any different type of application we have the capability of integrating with. One of the things I'm going to show today, something called Power Automate, allows us to do a lot more with a minimal amount of code with that integration. So hopefully we can help train you on how to do a lot of that stuff yourself. But for a lot of the more complex things, we have team members capable of providing those functions.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. All right. So to move on, I'm going to actually show you one additional piece of one additional thing here. Just give me one moment. So we had talked a little bit about in our earlier presentation. Let me just go back to our deck here. So one of the things that we talked about is that you build it once and we can deploy it anywhere. And one of the things that Microsoft provides is actually an application called Dynamics 365 Mobile that allows us to show our Power Apps that we've built, so our model-driven apps, on any mobile device. So what I'm going to show you here is our application built in our, sort of presented in a different format. So we built the application, and now that we've built the application, we can utilize our mobile device here and interact with it in a mobile fashion. So keep in mind I'm using a desktop version, but imagine that this is a mobile device. So this is sort of the format and layout that you would see. You could, of course, move your screen up and down. If you wanted to take a look at requests, you hit this little button down here. You go to requests. And as you can see, we have access to all of the same information that we have in the web, in the web browser, directly on our mobile device. Again, it's a responsive layout. What does that mean? It means that based upon the devices that we're using, so let's say it's a tablet, we can actually see the information in a different form, different layout. It will dynamically size itself to fit the device that you're using. So let's say that you have a really, really small mobile phone. Yes, you can still utilize the device to see the information that you want to see. All right. Any questions on mobile for us, Nick?
None at this time.
All right. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and move to our next demonstration, which is putting it all together, automation and integration through Power Automate. So I think we talked a little bit about how we can bring data in from other sources. And what I'm going to show you real quick is a demonstration of us pulling data from a third party, and in this case, Thingiverse.com. And Thingiverse.com is a website that provides 3D models. And there's quite a few models related to this topic on their website. So what we've done is we've actually created an integration using Power Automate to pull that data into our system. So first thing I'm going to show is I'm going to demonstrate how what the end functionality looks like. And then we're going to go ahead and I'll walk you through a much simpler flow of how to automatically send an email when a request comes in. So first off, I'm going to head back over into our application. I'm going to go, so take a look at our list of parts here. Let me just grab something here. Okay. So we're going to create a new part. One of the features within Power Apps or model-driven apps is the ability to have something called Quick Create. So you don't necessarily always want to navigate over to the area that you want to create a new record. Say you want to create a new contact or an account, or in this particular case, a part. So we have something called a Quick Create option up here at the top. I'm going to go ahead and click this plus button, click Part. It's going to ask me for two pieces of information. So first off is the original source. So this is the URL of a 3D printed object from Thingiverse. And I'm going to go ahead and select the category. This is a type of mask. I'm going to hit Save and Close. So that's going to take a minute to run. So while we're waiting, the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go over here to Requests, and I'm going to create a new request. And the request is from Scripps Hospital. And I apologize, it looks like one of our fonts that we had set up in our theme is white on white, which is very difficult to see, so I apologize. Second one here, our contact, I'm going to go ahead and choose Edward Norton. And finally, for the part, I'm just going to choose our protection visor. We need 30 of these. Go ahead and save and close the record. So we now have a new request record. And we'll loop back to that in a minute. Why did I create a new request? In the meantime, I'm going to head back over here to parts. And you'll notice that this is the one we just created. So I'm going to sort this by created on. You can see that this was created 1 minute ago. And it's actually gone out to Thingiverse. And if I click on this, you'll notice that it pulled in all the information from Thingiverse. So we have the description of the model, information about the model. It pulled in all of our photos. And if I go ahead and refresh here, it looks like it might not have completely finished. We'll also have a preview of the overall project. So all that is done with Power Automate, and we'll walk you through that in one moment. The other, and just give me 1 second here. The other thing that we did is we created that new request. So we created a request for scripts for a protection visor. And what that did is it went through using Power Automate, and it created, I'm just going to pull open my Gmail account here. It created a very simple email saying a new request has been made for 30 protection visors from Scripps Mercy Hospital. This is the end result, and in one moment, I'm going to show you how to generate this very simple flow. Okay. So going back to our make.powerapps portal, again, most everything that we need to do is contained within this single portal. You'll notice on the left-hand side, so far, we've only gone to data. If we close out data for now, we go down to flows. These are the objects these are the items that we use to do our automation. So for example, the get Thingiverse data flow has a number, is the piece that we use to pull that information from Thingiverse and populate our records within Dynamics. Our second flow is the send email notification. Let's go ahead and open that one up and take a look at it. So it looks like it ran a few times. Let me go ahead and edit it. So flow is a essentially a workflow engine. So we can have a number of different triggers that start a flow. We can start a flow based upon timing or recurrence pattern. There's some ability to do something called a webhook for those who are more technically inclined. But basically, it's a full automation tool that's interconnected to a number of different applications. I think there are over 300 out-of-the-box connectors. I don't know if Tyab or Nick could correct me on that one, but there are a number of different connectors. So the first thing we're going to do is we're triggering when a record is created. So we have our environment, so AB print 3D. Obviously, we can see that we're triggering on the requests, and we're triggering on any request. Our second step is we're going to list out all of the contacts within this environment. We could also choose to add some filters if we want to, but in this particular case, we're going to grab all contacts. And then we added something called an apply to each, which is going to loop through all the contacts that it found in the previous area. And we're going to check to see if it's of a certain type. And if it's of a certain type, we're going to send an email to that person. And that email, as we can see, we can go and drop in all of the fields that we found. So for example, when a record was created, or in this particular case, we're grabbing the email record, the email address record from the contact that it's found. And then we're going to create the body of our email. So a new request has been made. I'm grabbing the name of the request. And then of course we have a nice editor here. We can make it look nice, pretty. So within a few minutes, I was able to create a flow, some automation that would automatically send an email. And it required very, very basic knowledge of sort of the underlying structure of our database. And yeah. All right. So before I move on, do we have any questions from the group?
No questions. It looks like everything is pretty simple in there.
Yeah, thank you. All right. So for our last piece, sort of putting it all together, we're going to talk about the Power App portals. So we've built our application, and we're in it. We can add data to it, and you can see some of those interactions that we've created on the inside of the app. But we really need to expose this to the contributors into our hospitals. And to expand our reach, we want to make sure that as many people as we can log in and add requests and fulfill those requests. And to do so, we're going to use a product called Power App Portals. Again, I showed you a brief overview of what this looked like in the very beginning, Well, what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to sign in and show you sort of how those interactions work. So I'm going to go ahead and sign in. I'm going to sign in as Edward Norton, who works for Scripps Hospital. And you'll also notice that we have the ability to, if you haven't logged in, you can register. We can actually add other external sign-in providers. So it's OAuth, and OpenID Connect. So that could be Facebook and Gmail and all sorts of other providers that we can add to our portal. Go ahead and sign in. What we're actually using is sort of a built-in contact-based authentication. So Edward Norton is a contact in our system, and we've actually tied his credentials to that contact. So when I take a look, I've logged in as Edward Norton, and I go to his profile, you'll notice that his information is here. This is actually his contact record. So if I change his title here, later we can go back and look at his contact record within CRM, and we'll see it's the same. There's no synchronization. The data is actually written directly to the database and pulled directly from the database. That said, if I go back to our requests, you'll see that the request that we made today is already visible on the portal. And because the organization it's associated to, Scripps Mercy Hospital, Mr. Norton here can view the request and actually make changes to it. Additionally, you'll notice that these form layouts that we see here, they're actually tied to the same form layouts that we developed within Dynamics. So that remaining needed field, which wasn't here earlier, is here now because we modified that form layout within CRM. Again, the concept here is build once, deploy everywhere, right? So we literally take the form layouts that we show within the CRM interface and are exposing them to the portal. To sort of finalize the point here, Naval Medical Center San Diego, Edward Norton is not part of that. He's able to view the request, but when he views the request, he's not able to make those changes. So the portal itself has its own set of permissions, granular permissions that we can set so that only the information that we want them to interface with, they're allowed to do. If I were to log in as a contributor, for example, I could view the requests, but I couldn't actually create them. And if I click over here on contribute, it shows that I can create one, but it won't actually let me submit. So. All right, just to kind of finalize one more thing here, I'm going to actually go ahead and create one more request within our portal itself. So again, he's only allowed to select Scripps Mercy Hospital. He can't select any of the other accounts because that's who Edward belongs to. You'll notice that he can only choose contacts that have worked for Scripps Mercy Hospital. So actually, I'll make this one from Mary. And then we'll choose a part. So again, we'll choose that. Let's choose this HEPA COVID filter. Actually, let's go and choose that new product that we created, the COVID-19 mask version 2. I need 40 of these. Submit. So I've submitted that, and if I go over here just to sort of show you that it is actually writing directly to the database, there is our new request right there. So it's a direct write. And that's all I have for our demo today. I'm going to take it back to our slide deck. And then I'm going to pass it back over to you, Nick.
All right, thank you very much. That pretty much wraps everything up, and let's just talk about what we can do next here. If you're interested in getting started on Power Apps but would like to talk about how to get started, we are here for you. We can set up a workshop with you where we can brainstorm some ideas, identify some of your challenges and how Power Apps can actually solve them for you, and then show you some similar apps to what you're trying to create just to get your mind going on that. And then we can go over kind of what benefits you'd be able to see by creating that specific app. And hopefully by the end of that workshop, you'll be on your way to utilizing Power Apps for your business. After this, we will be reaching out to you with a copy of the webinar for your reference. And in the meantime, please feel free to contact us with any questions, or if you would like to set up that 1-hour Power Apps workshop. Otherwise, thank you for attending, and stay safe and stay healthy. Thank you.